Welcome to Entrepreneurs International Network, where entrepreneurs learn, network, and grow. I'm Roger Killen, your organizer. Today, Tina Dietz is training us on how to unleash our voice with audiobook production and publishing. Tina, I've got 3 questions that will help us get to know you at a personal level.
Perfect.
Number 1, what's the best decision you have ever made?
To date, the best decision I have ever made was in, December of 2017. I decided with only 2 weeks ahead of the event that I was going to go to a week-long business networking marketing cruise. And that particular event, I had never invested in myself to that level. It was a very expensive cruise. It was a group of people I had no idea who they were. I was completely operating on faith. And on that cruise, not only did I meet business partners that completely took my business to the next level for a couple of different reasons, but I also met my now husband completely unexpectedly out of the blue, who is also my business partner as well as my partner in life. And he has added a whole other layer to this company, which is the two of us together have tripled the company in the last 2 years.
Now that's what I call synergy.
Yeah, lots of synergy, lots of great energy there. Yeah.
Question number 2, what impact would you like to have as a result of your life on this earth?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I'll see if I can manage to not cry, because that is a thing I do. And so the vision that I have for what gets left behind as a result of the work that I'm doing now, in the past, and the future, is that, you know, that saying that we tell kids, or maybe you heard it growing up, that do what you love and the money will follow. Well, when I was a kid and all that, and you get into the world and all of that, you realize that no one was actually modeling that for us. It was something we have to teach ourselves, rather than it being something that is just true, that we can just live. So I envision a world that through the work that people I know do, through the raising this vibration on the planet, through unleashing all of these voices of leadership that need to get out, that need to impact people in the world, that we will change the world in such a way that when we tell a child, do what you love and you can make a great living, that it is a simple truth. It's not something they have to learn. It's not something they have to get over. It's not something they have to change their beliefs around. It is the default setting for our planet.
Beautifully said. Third and last question, what is the biggest challenge you've had to overcome?
The biggest challenge I've had to overcome is carrying other people. And that was something that I was taught that I was supposed to do as a girl, just who I was. And it was something that I didn't even know that I was doing most of the time. There's a wonderful quote from Anne Lamott that says, "Helping is the sunny side of control." Let that one sink in for a minute. And it took me up until not that long ago to really understand that everybody's on their own path. And when we interfere and we unsolicited try to help and make a difference and insert ourselves in it, not only do we interrupt their learning, we interrupt our own learning, and it just throws everything off. Not that we don't help each other, but there's a sense of kind of carrying is the word that I would use. So letting that go and learning how to let that go has made huge impacts all over my relationships. So business allowed me to go from being a solopreneur to having a team of 10, certainly made my children happier and my marriage fantastic. So that's my biggest one.
I am going to learn a lesson from you, I can tell. Participants, type your questions into the chat and I will pose them to Tina during her talk. Now, you're going to be sent a link to the recording of this talk in a few hours, but take notes anyway, because the very act of taking notes is going to increase what you absorb by up to 30%. Tina, are you now ready to wow us with your wisdom?
I got wisdom to wow you with, and I'm sure if you're wearing socks, then we can knock them off as you like.
You take it away. The stage is yours.
Okay, thanks. This is actually my first time being a guest of EIN. And Roger, thank you so much for having me. We met through mutual colleague and ended up here. And I just so appreciate you sharing this platform and this wonderful group of people with me. And for all of you, I know there's a lot of things you could be doing tonight. So I want this time that we spend together to be really rich, really juicy, be worth your time, and to make sure that it's of high value to you, getting your questions answered. And we can go as far and as deep as you can. I am known for being a bit of a fire hose in terms of information. And I also generally don't speak in a strict presentation with slides. And that is what allows me to be fully with you, to respond to where you as a group are, to what your needs are, to what your curiosities are. So I would really, really thank and encourage you to write any question you have into the chat related to audiobooks. Certainly, audiobook marketing, vocal marketing, as things come up and things get kind of triggered for you, even if you think it's off topic, we'll see what we can do to kind of incorporate things in. And if I can't answer it in the time that we have, then we can always take it offline, but really want to know how I can serve you best. So a little bit of background so that you guys have a sense of who I am and how I got here. I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this because it does really inform the entire way that I approach and my company approaches audiobooks and all of the audio work that we do, all of the vocal work that we do. So I've been building businesses a lot longer than I've been in audio. I grew up singing. I grew up in theater. I also grew up as an entrepreneur. So the business that my parents had was downstairs. I lived upstairs. I'm an only child. So I was dunked like a tea bag in entrepreneurial thinking from the time I was about 3 years old. And the business was my younger sibling. So of course I hated it. That's the way that works. But by the time I got to being an adult, I was so steeped in entrepreneurial thinking. Even though I became a therapist and I worked in higher education, I helped start a nonprofit working with teens and leadership. I did all kinds of work in a lot of different ways. Everything was formed by this get it done creative thinking that I had grown up with. And so I eventually started building businesses as a consultant and had the pleasure of working with more than 20 different industries in 8 different countries. At the same time, one of my favorite hobbies that I was using as a paid hobby was voice acting. And it's something that I've always gotten a lot out of, I absolutely loved. And I took master classes in audiobook narration and also learned the audio industry as a result. Well, through that process, I had a light bulb moment. Why weren't all of the clients and colleagues that I have who are business owners, subject matter experts, different kinds of professionals who are writing books for credibility and to get their word out and as products for their business, why weren't they doing audiobooks? Now, this is going back a bunch of years. So that led me down a rabbit hole. If any of you have ever read the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, you'll know the term entrepreneurial seizure. I had an entrepreneurial seizure, and that is what led me to a whole bunch of market research and piloting some programs in the world of audiobooks. Well, once I started offering audiobook services, because I got really irritated at the audio industry for being what I considered predatory and unfair to authors. There was a lot of practices, and there still are today, of production houses taking the rights and royalties of the authors, up to 80, sometimes 90% of rights and royalties, and not giving the authors any creative say in who narrated their audiobook. You would hear these books that read wonderfully with these highly qualified people, and then their audiobook would be done by someone 25 years younger than one who was the opposite gender, and it didn't sound credible at all. And so being an entrepreneur and being feisty, that really irritated me. So I decided I was going to go ahead and start piloting audio services. 1 year later, after doing some surveying with my community and piloting services, audiobook production, publishing, and distribution had taken over 75% of my business. And so, being a relatively smart human being, I decided to double down on it and really focus on bringing those services to life in this particular niche where people really needed them. And so to this day, our audiobook division serves pretty much exclusively nonfiction authors who are looking to build their platform, looking to build credibility, and to use their audiobook as an asset. And that's what we focus on there. The other division of our company, I'll just briefly mention, works with companies in podcasting. And that particular division, we do tend to work with companies, 7-figure plus companies, putting a human voice onto their work. And so much like on the audiobook side of thing, we're really focused on the deep privilege of what it is to be granted space in somebody's brain as a voice in their head, because that's what audio does. You become a voice in someone's head, even if it's being professionally narrated. And that is a powerful neurological tool. It is a powerful marketing tool. It is a powerful teaching tool. It's a powerful leadership tool. So that is the context I want you to start thinking about audio in as we talk specifically about audiobooks and audiobook production. And we are going to cover kind of soup to nuts of audiobook production. I'm going to approach this from an agnostic point of view. What I mean by that is I'm going to talk about it from kind of a high level, what to expect, questions you need to ask yourself, things you can expect in the industry. And I'm actually going to lay out some different options for you, including doing it yourself, working with a traditional audio publisher, or working with a company like us. And obviously, I'm not going to be pitching you anything tonight, but I'm happy to share information with you to go deeper should you wish at some point. Okay, so don't expect a 20-minute pitch from me at all. I don't roll. That's not the way I roll. It's all about relationships and making sure your book is being served, making sure your work is being served. So all that being said, the first place to start is, why create an audiobook? What do you need to know to even make a decision if an audiobook is going to make sense for your work? So let's look at, we're making some assumptions here when we're talking about audiobooks. Audiobooks are generally created after the ebook or paperback or kind of print or text version of your book. One of the questions I get quite a lot is, well, can I create the audiobook first? And this is not a recommended practice, and here's why. You can use your voice to create a book. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a verbal processor. If you don't believe that now, you certainly will by the end of this hour. So when you are creating a book and you're in that creative process, it's a little bit like a soup. There's a lot of changes that are going to get made as you verbally process through the information that you want to add to a book. There is never going to be a time where you blurt out words into a recording and that directly gets turned into a book. It is much, much harder to edit audio than it is to edit text. So if you want to use your voice to create your book right up front, the recommended practice, the professional practice, is to record, transcribe, edit, and then you'll have a finished product to create audio with. There's also, for independent authors, an important note about creating audiobooks, and it's that audiobooks are generally delivered digitally. Now, if you're my age, you remember books on tape. I'm sure some of you do too. Or books on CD. 99% of audiobooks are no longer delivered that way. They're delivered through one of these. That's what happens. And so you can get your audiobook done on CDs still. We do even have a few clients who do that simply because of the age and situation of their clientele. But it is extremely rare to do it nowadays. And so as such, because audiobooks are a digital product, they're going to share an ISBN, your identification number, with the other versions of your book. So this is an advantage to you. It means that everything gets lumped together and people are able to find the different versions of your book at the same time. You want people to do that. You want people to see you have an ebook, a paperback, or hardcover, depending on what you do, and the audiobook. Not only does that make you look more professional, but you want people to get a lovely case of might as well-itis and buy more than one version of the book. The vast majority of people who listen to nonfiction audio, particularly not fiction, nonfiction audio, often will buy a hard copy version of the book after they've listened to the audio and like it, because then they want to make notes. Then they want to have a reference guide that they can go back to more easily. They go through the audio to learn the material and to get to know you, and then they buy the hard copy to go with it. We see this over and over again in the nonfiction space, particularly with business books, spiritual books, and the like. Not so much with memoir, as you can imagine, but definitely with the business space and the spiritual space. So I want to create, again, this is kind of context for you to do that. If any of you out there are fiction writers, we can cover some fiction topics and considerations. Most of what we're going to cover today, you will translate over to fiction. Where you run into a lot of differences with fiction are in the marketing side of things, which we're not going to get so deep into today. But the production side of things, we can definitely talk about both. Okay.
Tina, there's a question from Mark.
Yeah.
Mark is asking about a reference for a fiction audiobook.
Like a referral to a company?
And that's all, Mark.
I'm not entirely sure what Mark's asking. So Mark, if you could clarify, that would be great.
And Jacqueline, surprised about shared ISBN, always been advised that each form SD have its own ISBN.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that interesting? But when independent authors publish their audiobooks, we'll talk about the process a little bit more. The portals that you go through, you do not have to have a separate ISBN. So that actually can be an advantage as you go along. It's one of the quirks of the industry. And audiobooks definitely do have a lot of quirks. And yes, Susan, the recording is going to be available for this. You know what? Actually, Roger, I think now would actually be a good time to share that download that I mentioned. So I work with a lot of people who have a lot of different learning styles. And because I'm a bit of a fire hose and this is very verbal, and I don't have a lot of visuals to show with you, what I have is a download that is a audiobook guide. Okay. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is also going to be covered in this guide. Roger's putting the link in right now, so you can go ahead and click on that right away if you like and start perusing through it. I'm not going to be following through it like a script or anything like that, but it's got a lot of question and answer. It has a whole step-by-step guide for creating an audiobook with a professional narrator. We're also going to talk about author narrated books today and some other various circumstances around that. That PDF, if you look at it online, it is designed to be looked at online. You're welcome to print it out, but it's full color, so don't waste your ink. Look at it online. It does link out to further resources like our FAQ, our audio library, all other good resources for you. So I wanted you to have something kind of comprehensive that you can refer back to, and you don't have to rely on your notes. I'm a terrible note taker. So I really prefer to have something that I can refer back to. So that's why we created this for you. So go ahead and click on that now. There's no opt-in or anything like that. It's just the document. And you can download it and start looking through it now or afterwards. But just to ease your mind that, yes, it's great to take notes, and you'll have a reference back to almost everything I'm going to talk about today. Okay.
Mark has replied and clarified that he wants a referral to a company that does what you do for nonfiction. He wants a company that does it for fiction.
You know, I actually don't have a good referral in that area. I get mixed reviews from most of the fiction companies we've worked with. So I'm sorry, Mark, I don't have that for you at this particular time. But let me know at the end if you want to look further, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Okay. Some of what you're going to hear today is how to evaluate an audiobook company. You want to ask questions. And some of the things we're going to go through today are questions that you're going to definitely want an audiobook company to know. And if they can't answer your question, that's going to be a red flag for you as you're going through the process. Okay, so good fits for an audiobook conversion. Audiobooks work best when they're highly narrative, when they tell stories. This is one of the reasons that true crime and memoir are the top two categories or top two genres in nonfiction. Those are the top two. Business falls about or not too far after that. Same with spirituality is right up there, generally in the top 5. So people want to hear stories. We connect through stories. And quite honestly, the better the stories you tell in your book, the better your book is going to be. If you're still in the process of creating your book, one of my best pieces of advice for you is to please read your book out loud, maybe even before you hand it to an editor for the first time. A couple of things with that. You will catch errors that you will not catch visually. Your eyes will fill in gaps automatically that you won't catch, but your voice will not because it has to coordinate through a different part of your brain. And on the other side of things, we want to make sure that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a minute looking at the chat. I probably shouldn't look at the chat. Squirrel. Let me just close that. That's going to be better. Okay. So the other thing is, besides reading your book out loud, that you definitely want to do is to make sure that your book is friendly for audio conversion, if that is something that you think you might be looking to do. So in that particular case, you want to make sure that any URLs, references out to websites, for example, are short and easy to read. You don't want a long URL in your book. So, if you have call to action and you want people to learn more about what you do, you don't want them going to www.titleofmybook.com/this/that-underscore something else. Okay. That, first of all, is not only a nightmare to narrate. Somebody doing it in a hard copy is not going to want to type that in. So URLs should always be short and sweet in a book. The other question you want to start thinking about as you're writing the book, is in the process of writing your book, is how much do I need visuals? If you're using visuals in a book, whether that is cartoons, charts, graphs, lists, questions, anything of the kind, which are all perfectly fine and wonderful, by the way, I don't want to discourage you from using them. Think about how you're describing that information in the text, as well as providing the visuals as a reference guide. Many authors, because they're so used to seeing their own work and they know what they mean, don't necessarily take the time to write the description and the explanation of a visual because they think the visual will stand on its own. You'll have a better book if you can narrate the understanding of the visual as well as provide the visual, and that will also help with the audiobook conversion at the end of the process. So, couple of types of books that don't necessarily make for great audiobook conversion are cookbooks, travel guides, depending on how they're written, highly technical guides. Again, it depends. In those particular cases, sometimes what can be done is an abridged version of an audiobook can be done, or an audio guide that is a companion piece to your book, which can increase the value of your book, and also give you another product to sell in kind of a suite of products to showcase your brand and your message. So again, free your mind, make sure that creativity is present for you when we're thinking about how to use audio as a medium to express your message and what you're getting out to folks. Okay. So here's the big question. Do I narrate the book myself? Do I work with a professional narrator? Yeah. This is the question I probably get asked the most, and it's an important one. But here's the real answer to that question. Ultimately, unless you're someone who has a following in the millions, when it comes to the sales of your audiobook, it's probably not going to matter. What's going to matter most in the production of your audiobook is the quality of the narration. So, if you are an author, you have some considerations to make. And this even goes for memoirs. Actually, the majority of our memoirs are professionally narrated. That seems counterintuitive to folks. But memoirs are, first of all, emotional. Secondly, they're a lot of work. They may involve multiple voices, character voices, which authors generally are not prepared to do professionally. There's a lot of reasons why authors don't necessarily narrate their own memoir. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. That being said, most of the books in our business space, also spiritual teachings, and some of the memoirs are professionally narrated. And one of the things I'm very proud of in Twin Flame Studios is that we are the only audiobook, as far as I know, in the world producing audiobooks with our authors the way that we do, which is we do not have to send you into a studio. We are able to remote in wherever you are in the world to create a setup for you that with you where we can get high quality audio. And then you are fully directed, just like you were in a New York City Audible production studio, by a professional director who also handles the tech and the recording and all of the audio concerns for you remotely. So it not only keeps the cost way down compared to traditional publishing or traditional audio production, but it is a very safe space. It's a comfortable space. We make sure that you really sound brilliant and you sound like a pro. So when you are thinking about doing your audiobook yourself, there's a lot of considerations for sound quality. There's a lot of technical considerations, even when you go into a studio. And sound studios vary dramatically. A lot of folks think that, okay, they've got a studio, it'll be great for audiobook narration. Unless they specialize in commercials, like actual television or radio commercials, or audiobooks, you're probably not going to necessarily be in a great space to record your audiobook. Studios that focus on music production are set up differently. They don't tend to have booths. They tend to have bigger spaces. You end up with a boomier, echoier sound. They also don't tend to know the standards for editing. So remember I said you have to ask questions, right? Anytime that you're recording with a studio, you want to ask them, first of all, have you ever worked with audiobooks before? If they say no, you really need to move on, because the technical specs for producing an audiobook are exacting. If you do not follow them to the letter, your audiobook will not be accepted for publication on Audible or any of the other platforms. And a lot of those settings can't be changed in post-production. So it has to be done correctly from the start. If you are working with someone who has recorded audiobooks, but has never actually pushed one through all the way through the publication process, could be a good fit, but that's also a red flag, because what that tells us is that they don't know and understand, nor have they been through the actual industry process for quality control. And that is a really important piece. So you want to make sure that whoever you're working with knows the quality control, really understands the process all the way through, because unlike podcasting or a lot of other audio production where you can show up with a Yeti, be in a big room like this and kind of just go, and the audio is going to be okay, or you'll be able to do things to it in post-production that'll make it sound pretty good. Audiobooks have some really specific settings to them that unfortunately we see people get bitten in the butt all the time by. So we don't want that to happen to you. Okay, pause for a moment. Told you I was a fire hose, but feel free to ask questions, even if you think there might be coming up. That's totally fine, guys. All right. One of the things that would be helpful for me to know, not really a question, but more information for us is, are you already an author? Where are you at in the process of writing your book? Would actually be really good to know. So if you want to pop some of those comments in the chat, that would also be really, really helpful. Yes, there are resources to find what those proper settings would be that you can go, probably the easiest place to go to would be acx.com. And that is a great segue to have us talk about where do you distribute your audiobooks once you're done. All right. And if you are somebody who is an independent author, you're not, your publisher either doesn't offer audiobooks, or you didn't go through a publisher of any kind, you didn't have publishing help, or if you did, it was more on a consulting basis, then you have two major options that I would recommend for you for your audiobooks. And both of these are also portals for those of you who want a more DIY solution. So let's start there with talking about the DIY side of things. One of them is acx.com. It stands for Audiobook Creation Exchange.com. And you can find that link also in the download that I gave to you. So that's one good resource for you. ACX does have a lot of information there. It is very DIY. You can upload your own files there and get things off to publishing, as well as do a narrator search. There's a lot of information in the download I gave you about finding narrators, vetting narrators, looking for the right voice, and some considerations around narrators. I've certainly worked on both sides of the fence, and as has all of my team on the production side and the vocal side, as well as on the business side or the author side of things. So again, please continue to pop your questions into the chat. So the other resource is findawayvoices.com. Findaway is all one word, so findawayvoices.com. And that is another distribution platform, as well as a creation platform. You can do both with your audiobooks there as well. So one of the questions I get asked a lot for narrators or narrated audiobooks is, what do you pay them? So audiobooks get created a little bit differently than a lot of other projects. Audiobooks get created either as what's called a royalty share project. A royalty share is when you partner with a narrator, you don't pay them anything up front, and you share the royalties for the next 7 years. I don't recommend this option for a couple of reasons. If you want to do it this way, absolutely go ahead and do it. One is 7 years is a long time, and it locks you into, you can only basically do distribution of your audiobook through that platform that you're working with the narrator on, whether that's acx.com, that's the most common one, or another, audiobook distribution platform that offers royalty share. It just really limits your options, and things change a lot with your business, with your life in a 7-year period. So my preference is to do what's called a per finished hour deal. And a per finished hour deal means that you're hiring a narrator through one of these, or what would be actually considered a producer. They're a narrator who is also going to handle the editing, the mastering, all of the production for the audio for you, so that it's ready to go out. So when you're vetting a narrator, in these cases, you're also vetting them to produce your audiobook in its entirety and make sure that it actually meets the standards that I had talked about before. So again, you definitely want to be working with people who are experienced, who have a track record of quality. You want to listen to and look at their other work. You want to see if there's anything, I always say benevolently stalk them on the internet and see if there's any kind of noise about relationships, or check their LinkedIn profile, just like you would for any employee or freelancer or partnership that you're going to be looking at. Go as deep as you need to do your due diligence before you hire someone, because once you sign a contract with Findaway Voices or with ACX, there's a lot of binding legal language in there, and they're not necessarily the easiest thing to get out of without laying down some cash. So make sure that you're getting what you need, and again, refer back to the document I gave you guys as well for some really good questions to ask. Okay. So those are, go ahead, please.
Question from Lisa. What's the cost range of do-it-yourself?
Yeah, so do-it-yourself for a narrator. So Lisa, please tell me if you're talking about recording it yourself versus finding your own narrator? That'll help me answer that question. But I'll dive right into one aspect of it before you do anything else. So audiobook production varies wildly. So that's why starting from, royalty share, you're basically giving, 50% of your royalties to somebody else for 7 years. It's a risk for them because they're not responsible for marketing it. You are. They're only responsible for getting the narration and the production of the book done. So that's something to keep in mind. Per finished hour, we don't recommend going any lower than $150 per finished hour. We actually pay our narrators a minimum of $200 per finished hour because of the caliber of work that we're going for. And there's so many things that can go wrong. So the narrators we work with have to perform at a very, very high level of professionalism. They need to be experienced. We do a lot of vetting of our narrators. So that's the price range that we recommend or higher if you're going to be working with a narrator. So when you're talking about the price difference between recording it yourself and working with a professional narrator, in our studio, those costs are actually fairly similar. And we do that on purpose. We actually try to make sure that the cost isn't as big of a factor for you. In truth, it's a lot more challenging and a lot more work to work with an author narrator than a professional narrator. Sorry, guys, y'all are more work because you're not professional narrators. And so having you get coached through the entire process, the scheduling that takes and whatnot is a time commitment. So this is something else to consider when you're an author and you're making some decisions around whether you want to narrate your book yourself or not is, one, are you going to enjoy it? If you're not going to enjoy it, please don't narrate your own book. If you love being in front of a microphone, then like I do, it's going to be a blast for you. You're going to have a great time doing it. Then absolutely, let's definitely talk about that. And you are going to need time. So let's figure you got a 40,000 word book. Audiobooks are always produced by word count. So not by page number, not by anything like that. It's word count. So let's say you've got a 40,000 word book. That's going to end up being around 4.25 hours long as an audiobook, thereabouts. You are going to need to record or be with your director for up to about 12 hours of recording time. So that includes your main recording and then, what are called pickup recordings, which get done kind of after the fact, after everything's been listened through, and you might record a few other things. So your time is something else you have to figure into the cost. When you have billable, consulting time like I do, you really do have to figure that in what you're doing. About 70% of our books are author narrated. So even our high level narrators, they do make the time. We flex across time zones and different parts of the world and schedules in the morning and the evening and the weekend and all kinds of stuff to accommodate our authors who are all over the place. But the scheduling is something that you do need to consider. So that's one of the ways that we work with you is to manage the timing of your audiobook and manage it so that it's workable for you in the face of whatever busy schedules you may have. Consistency in the recording is super important. Let me share a quick visual with you. I think this will be a little fun. About 90% of our authors, I'll just do a full screen share. It'll be a little dislocating for a moment. This is fun. See this picture here of a walk-in closet? You would be amazed how many high-level authors, best-selling authors, record in a walk-in closet. Walk-in closets are one of the best places that you can get good, high-quality audio sound. That microphone you see there is a Yeti, just like the one that I'm talking on. A lot of folks end up using them. We have a whole microphone and equipment guide that we give out to our authors. We have a whole preparation guide for our author narrators with vocal exercises, techniques, warm-ups, best practices. These are all things that we help you with and we walk you through as we do. But if you're ever wondering where you can get the best sound in your house, it's probably here. It's probably in your walk-in closet, right? So I love to share that because it's so fun. You would be amazed how many national commercials get recorded in walk-in closets. It's pretty funny. Secrets of the audio industry. Podcasts as well. Great place to record a podcast.
Tina, a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I'm a voiceover artist looking to do narration work. I've done more commercial. Is it best to work with a publisher or do independent search for clients?
So speaking on the voiceover side of things, your best bet is to start with ACX. There's a lot of great information there. If you haven't done audiobook narration specifically, coming from voice acting myself, it's a very different animal. I would highly recommend taking a class in audiobook narration by someone like Pat Fraley or Sean Pratt, who are specialists in that arena and teach some really great classes, and make sure that you really love it before you commit to it. So one of the things I learned when I was training in the area was that, oh my God, I love audiobooks. I love the industry. I have such respect for audiobook narrators. I don't want to be a narrator. I actually prefer to do commercial work or character work or even legal or TV work. I don't love doing my own audiobook narration, but I love the industry and I love the products. And that's why, my business went the way that it did. So you got to find where your niche there, where it's good. So definitely check out acx.com, see what's entailed there, and check out that info.
Mark wants to know how long a 100,000 word audiobook would take.
To produce, or how long would it end up being? So it would probably end up being about 11 and a half hours long when all is said and done, depending on the pacing. I'd have to, in order to get that done timing wise, all of our audiobooks, we like to leave about 90 days for production. And that is from the time we start the project until the time it goes live on Audible. For a 100,000 word project, we might extend that out to about 110 days, 120 days, because that is a quite a long book. That is probably a fiction book, as I'm assuming. Most nonfiction falls into 4 to 6 hours. Most fiction falls into 8 to 12 hours. So I do believe, Mark, that you said that you were a fiction author. So guessing that's the case. But those are some good parameters that you can set when you're working with a narrator. Other things you need to know. Are there any more questions, Roger, right now?
Yes.
Before I dive into something else?
There's a question from me. As you know, I work with TEDx speakers. Then at the end of their talk, I take all the speakers and convert their scripts into a book. This is an example of a book. And in this particular book, there are 15 speakers ranging all the way from an 80-year-old Caucasian man to a 6-year-old Chinese girl. How would one convert such a anthology style book into a narrated, into a audiobook? Sure.
So I'm going to give you the how, but first to that, I'm going to give you the should you. And this is actually an important question, because anthologies fall into a category of maybe for audiobooks. And not because you can't produce them, but because they don't necessarily sell very well. They're not a coveted genre when it comes to audiobook sales. That being said, companies like Chicken Soup for the Soul certainly have converted their anthology books into audiobooks, and there are certainly a number of them out there. The best way to do it is to work with 2 professional narrators, one male, one female, and have them characterize and character act each of those voices. So we have to remember that this is voice acting, and you have to kind of approach it similarly to a work of fiction, where each chapter is in a distinct kind of character voice. Another way to approach getting audio in the in with an anthology is to do an accompanying piece, which might be a short series podcast. And that's one of my favorite ways to work with anthologies, because the podcast is a great way to promote the anthology, to promote the speakers, and to use that power of the group in a often more cost-effective format than the audiobook. So those are some of my personal recommendations on anthologies.
Great. And a question, Helen, does word count include the verbiage at the start, including copyright, dedication, table of contents, etc.?
Not generally. There's usually so few words in there in the great scheme of things, though, that it doesn't hurt to include the word count. At the end of the day, word count is used for a ballpark of for quoting. And at the end of the day, it's the final length of the audiobook ends up being based on what you pay. So it's the quotes that you'll get in the audiobook industry are generally plus or minus 10% of what your final cost is going to be on an audiobook, just like a lot of estimates and all of that. Let's talk about distribution. I just saw a question pop up that had to do with distribution and royalties. Very important topic. So the 500-pound gorilla in the room of audiobook publishing is still Audible. Audible holds 60% of the market share worldwide in audiobooks. So that's just important to consider. And if you don't want your book on Audible, certainly that's up to you, but you do need to know that they do hold the majority of the market share in sales. Just an important note. Audible and Amazon are the same company. So acx.com that I mentioned before is the self-publishing platform of Audible. It's the self-publishing arm of Audible for audiobooks. So it goes directly to Audible and Amazon. And it also goes out to Apple Books as well, because they have a reciprocal agreement. So when you publish through ACX, as a lot of our authors opt to do, because we don't take any rights or royalties for our authors. So we go with whatever strategy is going to be best for you. When you go through ACX and you go exclusive through this platform onto Audible and Amazon, you receive 40% of the royalties. And that is for exclusive distribution. That is a commitment of 90 days. It used to be a year. Now it's only 90 days. So that's really nice to know. So most of our authors opt for, well, I'm going to go exclusive for 90 days. I'm going to push everybody to Audible and Amazon, because my other versions of my book are on Amazon anyway. I'll take advantage of those royalties, and then I can reevaluate after that 90 days and decide what I want to do next later. When you go non-exclusive, you then get the right to distribute your audiobook through your website or through other audiobook distribution platforms. So that is where Findaway Voices, which is the one that I recommend, comes into play. Findaway Voices, you can get your audiobook out onto 30, 40 other audiobook platforms. So your royalty rate going non-exclusive is going to drop from 40% to about 20, 25% based on the platform that you're on. But you're going to have wider distribution. So here's how I recommend that you think about it. Think about your distribution strategy as a marketing strategy. When you launch your audiobook, go exclusive initially and just do that launch thing that you do. Use your audiobook to extend the life of your book launch. Give your audiobook, give your book a second chance by launching it as an audiobook. You can launch your audiobook, a month or 2, 3, 4, 5 months after the other versions of your book. Extend the life of your launch. Use it as a marketing tool. Or you can give new life to an older title. You can give new life to a second edition. These are great applications for audiobooks that are not only going to give you a product, they're giving you a marketing asset. This is a mindset that I really want you to have. This is evergreen work that you are going to slice and dice and use different ways over and over again. We want you to utilize everything that this audiobook can give you. And so when you think I want to go ahead and go non-exclusive, get on to more platforms, Well, guess what? When you get onto all of those new platforms, it gives you something else to announce. It gives you something else to tell people. Hey, guess what? Audiobook went live on audiobooks.com, Scribd, and Downpour today. Check it out. You can find them here. This is really great. Or, oh, wow, our audiobook's available on 20 different platforms in X number of countries. Let's celebrate this. Gives you something to talk about, continues to build your credibility as an expert, draws people to you magnetically. All part of your marketing strategy through your distribution. And the best part of all of this is that the only thing you're going to pay for the distribution side of things is the royalty share that goes out, when you're dividing that up with the platform who's doing the distribution, either through ACX or Findaway. Everything is done through direct deposit into your bank accounts. You get reports from all of these platforms every month. So there's a lot of reporting that goes on so that you can keep track of things. You can also distribute your audiobook through your website a couple of different ways. It gets kind of technical. It's not something we truly recommend because it is a lot harder to deliver a series of audio files in a way that's as convenient as people are used to getting through the Audible app or the Downpour app or something that they're used to having on their phones. But if that's something that you want to discuss, we'd be more than happy to talk about your strategy with you, especially since we've only got a couple more minutes and I want to touch on a couple more things. Here's a fun thing I want to share with you. It's a great way to utilize your audiobook for the long term. Hold on. Let me try that again because I got to share a little sound with you. No, this. I know how to share screen, really, I do. All right. This is what's called an audiogram. This often gets used for podcasts, other audio formats, and we certainly use them for audiobooks. This is a book called Full Body Yes by Scott Shute. Scott is the director of mindfulness programs at LinkedIn Global, and really neat book. But you can see if I can get it to play for you.
Starting to understand that there was something more to life than dollars. Still, that voice was hard to hear sometimes. The choice seemed black or white. Sell my soul or follow my spiritual bliss and discover my true self.
And that is Scott's voice. He was someone we coached through his book. We had a great time working with Scott. But this is a way that you can share on social media. These tiny little videos are super shareable on social media. They're very dynamic. You can see things move. There's all kinds of different flavors, colors, and styles of them. They're all closed captioned. You put calls to action on them, all kinds of fun things. You can slice and dice your audiobook into clips all day long for years and deliver information from this. I have clients who even create entire courses from their audiobook to deliver on the back end, adding worksheets and discussion questions and all of that to every chapter and making them a course. So we want you to be repurposing and reusing. We want you to be thinking about this audiobook process as an for years to come. And it's really important to have that mindset that this isn't just a one and done situation. We want your audiobook to serve you for the long time. So there's a lot we covered. There's a lot more we could cover. I want to make sure we have time for some more questions.
We couldn't hear what you played.
Oh, bummer.
Hopefully it's not particularly important. So question, sales of the audiobook. Whose responsibility is that?
Ultimately, like anything else, it depends on if you build it, people won't necessarily come. So audiobook does come down to marketing. So book marketing, audiobook marketing, ultimately 100% lies in the hands of the author. You can definitely hire agencies to work with you on your marketing. We do produce assets for people in marketing. We can do certainly marketing consulting, and all of our packages for audiobook production actually include two really important things. One is that we actually give you a consulting session with marketing with a whole bunch of best practices and resources on marketing your audiobook that are very specific to audiobooks. The other thing that we do is we announce your audiobook with a audiogram, much like I just showed you from Scott Shute, to our social media following of over 300,000 people. So we love to do that. And we also feature your audiobook in our audio library, which you'll find a link to in that document. So we do want your book to be successful and support you around that. We often also will work with your marketing team or your consulting. Sometimes we refer out. So marketing is one of those things you want to be doing forever. Small actions of marketing daily are more important than doing a big shebang all at once. And keep falling in love with your work over and over again. That's what's going to keep your work alive and keep you motivated to keep sharing it and get it out into the world. I often say that if all that Stephen Covey had done when he wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People was an Amazon bestseller campaign, he never would become a household name. He had to keep sharing those 7 habits every single way he could possibly think of for years on end and keep falling in love with his own work back over and over again in order to become a household name. So your work, your words, your voice, and your message to impact the people you want it to impact requires you to fall in love with your work over and over again as well.
Helen wants to know if it's possible to hire a manager, producer, marketer. She's a counselor and writer, but not a marketer.
There's lots of places that will do book marketing for you. Audiobook marketing falls under book marketing. And most of the things that you would do to market a book, you would also do to market your audiobook. So it falls under the same kind of category. If book marketing is a topic that you guys are all interested in, I'm sure Roger can have another topic on that, or if you'll want to contact me, I certainly have colleagues that I recommend in the book marketing world.
Francisco wants advice for an experienced audio editor who wants to start his own business or freelance doing post audio services. I think Francisco is an experienced audio editor and he wants advice about starting his own business.
Okay. I think that's a little outside of our scope today to talk about. But so I'm not quite sure how we would help you in that arena.
Can I give Francisco your email, tina@twinflamestudios.com?
If Francisco is interested in some business coaching or consulting on the topic, absolutely.
Okay, I've just posted Tina's email. Francisco, reach out to her directly. And nobody else has a question. So maybe you would make some sage closing remarks, but you do have 3 or 4 minutes left.
Okay, I wasn't sure where we were on time because we were at the top of the hour here. I want to make sure we did kind of end on time.
Assume you have 5 minutes left.
Assume I have 5 minutes left. Okay. So let me dive into a couple more ways to use your audiobook as an asset. And a few more things about your voice. So speaking directly about your voice, even when I speak to rooms full of speakers, about half the room will raise their hand when I ask the question, who here doesn't like the sound of their own voice? And this is a really important thing to consider when you are an author and you are an expert, because your voice is your built-in marketing tool. It's your built-in everything about who you are. Your built-in communication tool. When we all came out and cried for the first time, that was our first declaration of I deserve to be here. So when you get your voice out into the world, you deserve to have it be as high quality as possible, whether that is a podcast, whether that is professional narration, whether that is narrating your own book, or whether that is the marketing assets that get created from those materials. So again, keep that in mind as you're going forward, that you want something that you're going to create one time and you're going to be proud of 10 years from now, because this work is going to be around at that particular time. When it comes to, again, kind of evergreen assets, if you are a guest on podcasts, one of our best practices is to let the host know that you have an audiobook version of your book, because there is a medium match with podcasting and audiobooks. People who listen to podcasts are more likely to be audiobook listeners. And that host then has the option of maybe cutting a clip of your audiobook into the interview, or they can put a sample of your audiobook on the show notes page, along with a link back to your books on Amazon and Audible. So that's a really best practice that I recommend. I also recommend that you start, with whether you're thinking about doing your book yourself, your audiobook yourself or not, in terms of the narration, start to look at your voice as a tool and as an asset, rather than something that is just that you're defaulting to, that we just kind of take for granted. Exercise your voice, give it love, give it attention, use it as the beautiful tool and the set of musculature that it is, because that's the vibration that's going to reach people ultimately, whether you're on a stage, behind a microphone, in a team meeting, or having a conversation across a cup of coffee. So that's my very strong feelings on the topic and my soapbox. So we've covered a lot here. There's a lot more detail we could cover depending on your individual books. You are more than welcome to send us a confidential, very confidential, I mentioned I'm a therapist, that is carried over into my business, a very confidential PDF copy of your manuscript if you'd like an evaluation of your book, if you have specific questions about your audiobook or your book conversion to audiobook, please feel free to reach out. Tina at twinflamesstudios.com is my email address. You can also connect with us through the document that you downloaded, through that link there, to listen to samples, to reach out to us, to schedule a time to chat. We're here, whether it's in the next few weeks or the next few years, to serve you and to see that your voice gets out into the world and makes a difference with the people that it needs to be made with. So that's kind of what we're all about. Time
for one last question from Kim. It's about accessibility. Here it is. I'm assuming your answer is yes. Is there anything you'd like to share about accessibility? For example, being able to purchase and launch the audiobook if you're visually challenged.
We actually do have a client that we worked with who is visually challenged. He's been blind since birth, and we worked with him. He actually used a Braille copy of his audiobook to create the own audiobook, and it did take longer. There were some technical considerations to work with, but he had a very successful experience with the audiobook. And if you actually would like to talk with someone who's actually been through the process with a visual impairment, I can actually speak to this because Dave, the author, has offered this if this ever came up in the future. So I'd be happy to connect you with that particular author. But we do try to make sure that any concerns, accessibility concerns, all of that are definitely going to be addressed. We actually do even have a couple of audiobooks that specifically have been designed with additional information on them to make sure that they were fully accessible for a visually impaired audience. So I hope that answers that question. If not, please let me know.
Great. Tina, you're getting lots of accolades in the chat, and I will add.
Thank you, guys.
Your talk was on point, just excellent stuff, great information. I love the fact that you didn't choose to give a slide presentation. It was just you raw and naked in front of your audience. And I bet you your audience really appreciated that direct contact. Nobody could possibly have felt that they weren't being talked to and that their needs were not relevant to you. So for that, on behalf of EIN 79,000 members and the 40 plus members who were here today, I thank you hugely.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you all for being here. And please do follow up with any questions. We're here to, like I said, we're here to serve.